I use it in a different way than you do. My
Okay.
right is the new right. It's not the old right. I
Oh,
need to come up with a new word. We need to fix that. We got to talk about
yeah.
branding. All right, X.
N-
We're gonna do that.
Okay.
We're gonna have that. If it like, we're gonna have that discussion about branding because we got to come up with a better name.
Sure.
All right,
Sure.
Brett is on the line. All right, Jack. I love talking with you. We're gonna do this again. Hey, Jack, hop on Telegram on my group chat. Okay.
I will.
All right. Peace out, homie. So let's hear from Brett. Let's see what he has to say. Yo, Brett, you got it fixed, man?
I think so. Can you hear me?
Sounds good, man. So
Yeah.
let's
We can hear you. Yeah. There you go.
You've been listening to this for a little bit, so we'll just give you a platform, I guess. So go off for about maybe a minute at most, and then I don't know. We'll see what happens.
I just want to make this. I'll just make this very succinct.
Okay.
I don't disagree outright with what you're saying. I subscribe to your channel for a reason because I think it's interesting, and I do. First of all, thank you for having me on this little moment. I appreciate it, but I don't think.
Yeah, thank you.
Go ahead.
No, thank you. Thank you.
Oh yeah. Okay. I don't think that there is. How do I say this? I think in my disposition, I'm of the left, but
Okay.
I don't think there is much. How do I say this? Much strength or hope on that side of the aisle, if that's what we want to do.
Okay.
I get kind of disenfranchised by the politics of the left these days. And that's not for someone who used to identify like as a leftist hardcore, and that's not the case anymore. I'm not really political in my overt approach to life anymore, but I will say that in my observations, what I see on the left is disintegration, and there's no game plan, there's no consensus, except for a reactionary politics against a perceived, I guess you could say, threat or enemy. The left has decided to take it upon themselves to identify, and it's made me not want to vote, to be honest. It's made me not want to take sides. It's made me not want to be a part. That's the way to say it. It's made me not want to be a part of the politics of this country. I'm from the United States, and that doesn't mean that everyone in this room is, or this conversation is, but in the United States, it's just I think personally, it's a mistake to get involved with left-sided politics in the United States. That's
I would generally, but can I ask you a question?
Of course. Yeah.
What do you value?
Truth. The quick answer is truth. The truth is the most important thing.
And do you feel like the leftist, let's put it two ways. Do you feel like the leftist, let's say the leftist interpretation of history is necessarily based on the truth or a certain moral interpretation of the truth? And secondly, do you think that the leftist mindset today is generally concerned with the truth?
Those are great questions. Those are like primary questions to be asking. And I think the answer is, for the first part, in terms of interpreting history, there's an essence, or there's an optimism within, in my opinion, there's an optimism within leftist interpretations of history that likes to see things a certain way. Like it's better to have a renaissance than it is to have a problem, I guess you could say. But at the same time, is the leftist mindset based on reality? In my observations, not anymore. I mean, if it was ever when I was involved, that's another issue. But as of today, I would say it's not necessarily growing extremely radical, but it's growing disconnected and trying to invent a reality that doesn't exist and can't be supported within our world today.
Yeah, I can't remember who talked about it, but they talked about like an unreality, this kind of like insistence of something that's totally wrong in a way, and believing it to be reality. But I asked that question about kind of the history part because I find that interesting. Like, we all kind of have like a kind of moral constellation that we follow, things that we value. And usually it's more than one thing, right? Like usually we value more than just truth, and I assume you do too. Are there any other things that you value highly?
Absolutely. Let's see, life in general. I mean, the living of life is a big thing for me. I think I could say freedom and liberty, and I do mean that, but for what that's worth. And I think freedom of self-expression, the things that make humanity interesting, in my opinion, are important. But I know there's a lot of other important things I could mention, but I guess at this moment it's really about the ability to be safe in one's person without it's like safety in one's person without having to feel threatened by another, or without you or me or anyone conducting that behavior to another person. It's just like,
okay,
have your space, I have my space, kind of thing.
Okay, so I'm going to try to connect the first part of that and the last part of that, and this is going to sound spurgy probably right in the beginning, but bear with me. So you said you value life. Now I assume there's a little bit more to it than that, right? Like, for example, yeast is life, and I assume you wouldn't think a successful outcome is just a planet filled with yeast and nothing else. Am I correct?
Yes, sir. You are correct.
And so is there something kind of more to life, just life itself, that you value? Is it like the diversity of life? Is it like the development of life? Is it like the capability of life, or the symbiosis of life? Is there something else to it?
That's a great question. I would say you kind of nailed it when you said the potential of life. It's okay. We can do anything as free will, in my opinion. It's
I resonate with that a lot, because I think the capability of life is very interesting. And what I find, and you mentioned something else, and this is kind of an aside, you said freedom, and I find that one really important too. And I find that's an interesting juxtaposition, right? Because there you have like the capability of what we can do, but that also kind of infringes a little bit on our individual free will if we want to proceed forward, like as a, let's say a multi-planet species or something of that nature, right? We kind of have to get our shit together and organize a little bit better. So there's something a little bit more to life than just life, and that's like its capabilities. And what do you mean by its capability? What do you mean by its capabilities, I should say?
That's a great question as well. And what I'm about to say, I think applies to humans as well as you could say other forms of relatively sentient life. Like I would even include cats and dogs in this statement, what I'm about to make. It's the ability to make decisions, and it doesn't necessarily have to be complex decisions. Like a dog or a cat, or I guess any mammal for that matter, or any creature that can make a decision to do something to ultimately better itself. And I guess that comes back to humans in particular, but the ability to take free will in one's hand and use it. I think that is pretty cool.
So could you say like one of your values is to take your free will to increase your capability?
Definitely. Yeah.
As a kind of primary. Yeah. And I totally agree with that. So I think in terms of life, we kind of are somewhat on the same page in terms of we both agree that the capability of something is very important, not simply the fact that it's living. And I guess I would add the caveat that like to have that capability, you need a degree of complexity and development, right?
Yeah, I'll give you that. That's for sure.
Okay, great. So far we're pretty much on the same page, I think. And then the last part, and I found this interesting, was you mentioned safe in your own person. And I thought that was really interesting. Is there a reason you mentioned that? That was the last part you mentioned too.
Yeah, that's very observant. And yeah, I think the ability to be safe in one's person in today's world is frankly a luxury. It's not a privilege, I don't think. I think it's relatively scarce, altogether scarce, because there's so much, well, not so much yet, but there could be a lot of conflict in our world. And being safe in one's person doesn't entirely rely on one's own choices. It also relies on the choices of other people.
Interesting.
So I think that being safe or being well. It doesn't have to be safe necessarily. It can just be wellness.
Huh. Okay. Well, we could take that in all sorts of ways. Like one of the things I really care about, just on that I'd like to care about more for my personal health is like microplastics, right? Because that's really bad for your endocrine system and things like that. And that's something that's not being talked about at all. Okay. So, I mean, where I originally wanted to go with this, I'm going to go to in just a moment. But you mentioned kind of like the potential for a lot of destruction. Where do you think that comes from? Like, where's the main source of destruction these days?
That's above my pay grade, to be honest. I wish I knew the answer to that because.
Well, I mean, you mentioned that, like, okay, first you mentioned like safety was being safe in your person, and that's a luxury. So what is kind of infringing upon that today, mostly?
That's a great question. Let me think about that for just a second. What is infringing upon the general safety of most people? I would say,
is it like a specific thing, or just constellation of things, or even like a class of people, or?
Oh, it's definitely not one type of person, in my opinion. It's
well, I meant like the bourgeoisie, if you're a leftist or something like that.
Oh, no. In my opinion, I think it's the rising tide that we're all facing. I think there's a lot of circumstances that everyone sees and everyone faces.
Okay.
It doesn't even have to be global. It could be national or regional. But
okay.
I think,
wow.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying. We're all facing a lot of.
No, I don't. Well, I do, and I don't, because I felt this way when I lived in the United States, and I haven't lived there in a long time, quite honestly. And I kind of felt that kind of rising anxiety, and that was one of the reasons I got out. But yeah, that was just something I generally felt about the United States. It was really strange.
Are you talking about an omnipresent source of anxiety that you can't quite locate, but it's there and you know that it's there? And
Yes.
it is something that's in the zeitgeist, but nothing tangible or substantial, like nothing physical, but it's there.
Yeah, it wasn't good. I'll talk to you later about it. But okay. So I wanted to kind of go to this last part, because in the beginning we talked about kind of what is life and what is important with life. And, we kind of agreed that capability, like the ability to use free will to increase one's own capability, was itself kind of like a virtue, right?
I would have to think about the word virtue, but it is definitely an important element of human life.
Okay.
The ability to use free will.
Gotcha. Okay. So we disagree a little bit on that, but we're still kind of on the same page.
Totally.
So the last thing you mentioned was kind of safe in your own person. That was an interesting choice of words. And I'm sure we could dive into that more, but I don't want this to turn into like total psychoanalysis. But so in terms of like how you develop into something that's more capable, would you agree that you have to kind of undergo challenges?
Unconditionally agree with you on that.
And discomfort.
Absolutely.
And sometimes failure or getting hurt, depending on what you're doing.
You don't. I will. Yeah, I know what you're saying. I think I understand what you're saying. And
if you're doing something that involves physical activity and you want to get good at it, you most likely will get hurt at some point while doing it. Probably not seriously injured, but you'll get a twisted ankle or something. No.
I agreed. Yes.
Yeah.
You're being very reasonable. Yes.
So you would kind of agree that setting up opportunities to overcome challenges that aren't necessarily life-threatening and that are kind of like that are challenging but can be overcome are important for people's development. No,
I would agree. Yes, it depends on where it comes from and what it is, but in a concept, yes, that is very, very true, because there's no strength if you don't have resistance. If you don't have.
And I find that very interesting about the modern world, is that it's very, on one hand, it's very like absent of that as any sort of like ritual or kind of conscious thing, right? But on the other hand, there's a lot of kind of like low grade anxiety and a lot of like kind of dysfunctional relationships that people kind of have to figure their way through as they're growing up, and that in a de facto way act as struggle, no doubt, but that they might not process in the best ways. So I find that very interesting about the United States. and the West. But I guess what I'm getting at is what I'd like to see personally, and I guess my point being, like, as a kind of political philosophy, what I would kind of describe, and I guess it doesn't totally adhere to this notion of right left, but I would like to see a society in which we kind of consciously, on a systemic and widespread cultural, social level, kind of ensure that people have these challenges to overcome so that they can, as they're developing in their formative years and in their later years, kind of get a sense of accomplishment for their own selves, and so they can grow to be more developed, more capable, things of this nature.
Definitely. Rites of initiation or rites of passage are very absent in, I guess you could say, my country, I guess maybe the Western world. And I can make a comment as to why, but it's just more the observation that they're not there. And I
certainly
definitely agree with you. That that individuals and collective bodies need those kinds of experiences. And if it's socially built to be sort of like a ritual or thematic or systematic, if that's one thing, that's fine. Or if it's just a person seeking it out to do it for themselves,
most definitely. Yeah, offering the space for that, right? There's less of that in the modern world too, right? Like, it seems like when I was growing up, right, there's woods everywhere near where I lived. And nowadays, a lot of those woods have been cut down for either a golf course or a strip mall or something like that. So there's even less of that. There's less opportunity to kind of freely roam and freely explore as you're a child, which is very sad. I feel sorry for children who grow up in cities.
I could see that.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in a smaller city, but it was enough wooded kind of areas. But in any case, when I say systematic, I don't mean you need this like one grand system like North Korea style, but just kind of a general cultural understanding and social understanding that you need a little bit of structure. You need a little bit of guidance. You need challenges to overcome. You need people to encourage you to overcome those challenges rather than kind of coddle people and cater to their, worst kind of inclinations.
I would say, there's no disagreement there.
Yeah, I mean, and that's really that's kind of the core. I mean, that's part of the core of my political philosophy, I would say. You kind of mentioned like there's a lot of danger to people right now. I kind of interpreted that to mean in terms of the recent health problem that people have been talking about, as well as the conflict in Ukraine right now. And with regards to both of those, I would say that there's this kind of class of unaccountable elites who get to do whatever the fuck they want, essentially. And we kind of suffer the consequences if there are any. They don't really tell us if there are any, honestly. And, they just keep going. I mean, I don't want to get too conspiratorial, but you live in the United States, right? Do you see little line clouds everywhere?
I think I know what you're talking about, and I don't anymore or recently, but I have in the past, and I definitely have done my research into that subject.
Yeah,
and I know that it's something that a lot of people are interested in. So I've seen that, but not anytime recently in my area.
Well, I certainly can't say for certain what they are, but I can say for certain that they don't exist in some parts of the world. So there's that. But the point being is, we have this class of people who get to do whatever they want, and they don't even tell us what they're doing. And if there are consequences, they have no accountability. And so this isn't really a democracy. Hillary Clinton is talking about if Trump wins again, then it'll be the end of democracy. Well, it's not a democracy; it's an oligarchy. And it's a very almost culturally, socially specific sort of oligarchy. It's like the neo-Western ethos, leftist ethos oligarchy based on kind of human rights, this notion of human rights, at least, Enlightenment kind of thinking. But it's all very fake at the same time. It's all kind of based around it, almost enslaving us under technology and increasing amounts of financial technological control, I would say. And that's the kind of general trend of things. You don't see the left addressing that. at least, you know, the mainstay of the left today, unfortunately, because I was a leftist too. And I guess when I say right wing, I mean something very, very different than probably what you're thinking. And probably in some ways, yes, because I do value virtues that lead to success, you know, lead to optionality, lead to increased capabilities, and lead to more life, but a kind of developed and expansive life that also allows for freedom that we were talking about earlier, freedom to explore, freedom to kind of pursue your own obstacles.
Definitely. You're, in my opinion, and from just having talked to you or communicated with you here, you have a very reasonable philosophy on politics and life. I don't think we disagree on what we're talking about. I don't think we disagree very much at all.
Yeah,
maybe we do, but that's not the point.
I mean, I'm sure the devil's always in the details. I'm sure if we looked for him, I'm sure we'd find disagreements. But I'm sure there's a lot of things we agree on at the same time.
Definitely.
Yeah. And yeah, so I mean, I find that kind of interesting. And I mean, I know that the title of this is kind of triggering, right? Like what to do to build the right wing movement. But I when I say that, right, I really mean that kind of movement that kind of isolates those elites and takes some of that discontent to make it a little bit more effective, maybe make a solution, and B, promotes a kind of society that operates to, I mean, I know that's very fashionable to be like, you know, laissez-faire, but the reality is kind of a little bit of structure is good. You know, a little bit of like gender norms is good. A little bit of tradition is good. There's a saying in Buddhist countries, right? It's, even if you don't believe in Buddha, you should still go to the pagoda. And it basically just means it's good to kind of observe it. Even if you don't believe it, do the act. It, you know, you kind of fall in line. It helps with social cohesion. You know, it kind of proves you're a kind of stable, like reasonable person that goes along with kind of social mores. So it's in a way kind of a good thing. And I think, I don't know, I think you kind of, I don't know, almost need something like that. I forgot where I was going with that. I'm sorry, I kind of rambled there. My bad.
No worries.
Yeah.
I appreciate you letting me come on and speak my piece. And
yeah. I'm glad you came on, man. It was interesting talking with you. Are you familiar with the website?
I am not, but if there's a link in the show notes, I will definitely take a look.
Yeah, do me a favor and look at one of the other shows. It's really easy. It's Institute for Virtue Research, and it's, like I said, it's a very, I don't fuck with white supremacy. You know, I don't do that sort of thing or anything like that. You know, I was very much into left-wing politics, so I think I agree with you on a lot of things. I think that distinction is a good thing, if that makes sense. So kind of this notion that of equality being good is not very good. If you think of what like equality would mean in like the biological world, it would be like a factory farm, or like a soybean farm in the Midwest. It's not good, right? You want a little bit of diversity. You want something more like a tropical rainforest. But that involves distinction, not equality. Things are very different, and it's good to have those differences, but you have to recognize that they are differences and they're there, if that makes sense. It can't be kind of like all meshed together. Everything's everything. But I do agree that people need the ability to rise into distinction, right? We need, throughout our lives, we want to feel accomplished, right? We want to be able to overcome challenges. So we need distinctions that were allowed throughout our lives through work, through practice, through developing capabilities to overcome. And I think that would be a great thing.
Agreed. Yeah, I think what, if I may, and then I'll leave, I'll just exit after this. I think that what, in my observations, what you're pointing at with your words and meaning behind them is something that is taking to people's hearts more and more these days. And I see it in the United States as an American, as someone who has this as my context for my everyday. I see what you're talking about as definitely sitting in the heart centers of a lot of people, more people than I remember in my entire life in that sense. So I definitely, when I say the left has no real power, but they have influence, I think the left is because of the left's own actions and stances, it's falling away. And I don't think a lot of people perceive that are on the left, but a lot of people are beginning to get a sense of how do I say this, of the movement of the right. I guess that's one way of putting it. I don't want to just say there's the left and the right, but what you're talking about, I see as being in a lot of people's minds and hearts. That's what I'll say. Is people are beginning to kind of change their opinions. In my opinion,
possibly. Well, I think honestly, what I think you're going to see happening is you're going to see a lot of kind of, I guess, what we could call classical fusionism, kind of social conservatism with a more interventionary, less libertarian economic policy. And I think what part of that is a product of is during the early 2000s, well, into the 90s, right? Everything was kind of left wing in the 90s, kind of against apartheid, Greenpeace, environmental stuff, and then in the 2000s you had anti-war stuff, all very left wing. Occupy, left wing, kind of got kind of weird there, but more or less left wing. And then you started getting this kind of woke culture, like SJW stuff, also trafficking under the name left wing. And it's been the last 30 years of opposition, quote unquote, being left. And it's kind of gotten nowhere in terms of their overall goals, in terms of really wanting to remake a better society. But they've seen, quote unquote, the left kind of come into their own and to influence, like you said. So I think what you're going to see is a lot more people swinging to the right. Maybe not everybody, maybe not a majority, but I think you're going to see a little bit more polarization. I think you're going to see even people on the left kind of becoming a little bit more, let's say, culturally right, even while maintaining a little bit of left-wing economic perspectives.
Agreed completely. Because I'll just say that, and then I'll